Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:04 p.m. This is the February 14, 2025 meeting of the Legislative Study Commission for the Environmental and Health Impacts of Per and Polyfluorinated Chemicals. We have less than a quorum at the present time, but I want to welcome Senator Abbas, Representative Mendelbaum, Representative Dumont, who is the government appointee from the town of Hudson, and many of our legislative members have committee work, so they're tied up today, and others have just employment commitments that don't allow them to be present. So we will pass on approval of the minutes for December and January and carry that over till next month. In terms of status of commission vacancies, I'll give a little update, but Representative Mooney and Rung will be hopefully in attendance next meeting and can give some further insight. But as mentioned, we do now have a town of Hudson town government representative, Representative Dumont, and two new Senate appointees, Senator Abbas and Senator Magoo, who's in committee but may join us later. Representative Mendelbaum, who is here, and possibly in the same seat as Wendy Thomas, which is unusual, so we'll have to straighten that out somehow. So welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you who have been with us for a long time. Because we don't have a quorum, we'll pass on number 4 again, which is election of a chair, and my personal request for appointment of a clerk to take minutes or make assignments to take minutes. And that brings us to real business. Don Preventure is going to give us an update on MDD. Thank you.
And Chris, can I ask you a question? Are we allowed to even go forward with all this without?
It's a non-meeting, so we're not doing official business. So this is, yes, we can go on as a non-meeting.
Even though it's being recorded and we're just
take information and make an official record of it for right to know purposes, but we're not going to do any business today.
All right.
All right, so I got some information, some water quality graphs that I'd like to share, but I'm not sure how I do that right now. I don't know if there's a share button on here, share screen type of, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, show my screen, here we go, great.
Tim Magoo, Senator Magoo is signed on, by the way.
Oh, wonderful, welcome.
So I'm not sure what I'm sharing, actually.
We see your GoToWebinar tab.
Yeah, I'm trying to put a different screen on there. What can I do here? Let's see, show screen, change presenter. How's that? You looking at a graph now?
Yes, yep. Thanks.
Good. All right, figured it out. Yeah, so I'm Don Preventure. I'm chair of the Merrimack Village District Water Department, for those who might not know. We've certainly been impacted by the PFAS situation in southern New Hampshire. So MVD, Merrimack Village District, has 6 active wells and 1 well that we've abandoned basically a couple years ago. And we've been collecting PFAS data on a monthly basis on all of those wells since 2016, when this first kind of came to light, the PFAS issue. And there's been some kind of correlation in the past about elevated levels of PFOA during times when either we were pumping the wells harder than normal, drought periods, during times when when there wasn't as much recharge going on. And I'm not really sure which one it's related to. However, this may have shed a little bit more light in some of this, some of the data that I'm looking at here. So these are graphs that we've been preparing from the PFAS samples. So what we are plotting here in the orange lines, this jagged orange line, is PFOA, and then there's 3 other compounds. These are the New Hampshire regulated compounds, the 4 of them, which is PFOA, PFOS, which is this green line down here, PFHXS, which is the dark blue, and then or the light blue, I should say, and then PFNA, which is dark blue. And these are the MCLs. It looks like PFNA, I believe, is 18, PFOS is 15, PFOA is 12, and I believe PFHXS is 11. I don't know if I have those 2 reversed or not, but the only one that is in violation pretty consistently is PFOA. So this is our well 2, and I'm looking at the spikes here where the elevated data comes in here, and this well 2 seems to be, it's more of a late summer into a fall period where the PFOA seems to be elevated the most. So, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, by October and definitely by November of every year, the big high demand for irrigation is over. So this is kind of maybe leading to me to think that it may be due to periods of dry period where there's no recharge going into the groundwater. I guess if you think of it, if you're getting recharge, from precipitation, it may act to dilute the concentrations in the groundwater, which you normally get more recharge in the springtime. So this kind of makes a little bit of sense to me, because late in the summer and into the fall, we certainly tend to have drier periods. We certainly had a dry period this past November, starting from October, November. So this is that kind of the correlation that I'm seeing here, is all these spikes tend to happen in late summer into the fall period. So going down to the next well, well 3, this well is currently out of service. It had very elevated sodium and chloride, so we didn't want to spend the effort on putting PFAS treatment on this well if it was going to be compromised by sodium and chloride. So we decided to drill a new well, and I'll show you that one later. But this one's a little bit different. There is like this one spike that happened in May of 21, so that's not necessarily in a late summer fall period. Another slight spike in February of 21. Again, that's more in the winter time. But the rest of these all look like, around summer to late fall, even into a little bit of the winter. Well 3, that well is next to Green Pond, so it could be influenced potentially by surface water. That's the only thing I can think of that may be causing some of these spikes in the wetter periods of time, I guess. And again, some of these spikes, it's not just PFOA. It looks like PFOS kind of follows it as well, not to the same extent, but you see a peak here at about the same time as PFOA. Same thing, PFOS here kind of spikes when PFOA does. These little spikes in here are not as pronounced, but you kind of tend to see all of the PFAS sort of spiking at the same time. Moving on to our well 4. Now the purpose of these, the next 2 wells are going to show, well 4 and well 5. Those wells are the closest to St. Gobain. Those are around Merrimack Commons, the Tractor Supply area, if anybody's familiar with Merrimack. And that is the closer wells to the Saint-Gobain facility. And what struck me here was just this past November, it was the highest recorded PFOA level in the raw water of that well since data was being collected. You'll notice a data gap in here. So what happened in 2016 is because this was over the 100 and the 70 part per trillion sort of action level that was in place at that time, those wells were required to be turned off. So that's why you don't see any data between 2016 and about 2020, in August of about 2020. That's when the treatment plant went online, so that we turned the wells back online and started filtering the water again. But you'll kind of see sort of a steady path. You know, you get your highs and lows basically over the course of, you know, the next just about 3.5 or 4 years. And once you get into 2023, it looks like the trend is kind of going up. So there's definitely an uptrend going on here. You kind of get the same thing going on at well 5. These two wells are, you know, within a few hundred feet of each other. So those are both the closest to the Saint-Gobain facility. And you kind of see like this upward trend starting over the last couple, 3 years here. So I guess there was a question that I've been wondering since the start of this, and I've asked different people that I know in the industry and DES as well about, we know there's contamination in the soil from aerial deposition because that's where it starts. It deposits on the soil and then it gets washed down into the water table. So the question I had was, how much of the PFAS is retained in the soil? Is there still enough there that it's, because it's not really being added to on the surface anymore. The emissions have ended essentially, or significantly decreased. Now they're ended because the company's no longer there anymore. The facility's not emitting anything. But when the precipitation passes down through the soil, it grabs some of the PFAS in the soil and, you know, washes it into the water table, into the groundwater. So eventually you would think that over a long period of time, that PFAS is going to transfer from the soil into the groundwater. The question I had was, where are we in that level of contamination in the soil? Is it to the point where most of the PFAS has drained through the soil and got into the groundwater table? Or is there still more PFAS in the soil that's going to increase the groundwater concentrations? And I'm kind of leading maybe to think that this pattern that we're seeing with the highest values that we've recorded ever since we've tested the well, we may be in a situation where it looks like the groundwater is going to be impacted worse as time goes by. We're not at that break point yet where the amount of PFAS in the soil may be depleting. So then we would think the groundwater concentrations would start being depleted if there was no PFAS in the soil to be carried into the groundwater. There's also some concern about some of the early test results, lab testing. And, you know, we've been advised that some of the early data here may not be as reliable as we thought because of lab errors and things like that at the time. So that's still a question that I have. And Andrew, if you want to jump in, or after I discuss this, I know you're a hydrogeologist, maybe you have some thoughts on this too, but that's one of the questions that I'm still wondering is, are we in a position where we're going to continue to see an increase in the groundwater PFAS because we're still washing that soil, the PFAS in the soil that's getting into the groundwater? You know, hopefully at some point, and I don't know when it's going to be, but that break point would happen where once the PFAS in the soil has been washed into the groundwater, then maybe the groundwater concentrations can start being reduced. I don't know. So that's wells 5 and 4 we just looked at. Now we're at wells 7, and the next one I'm going to show you is well 8. And those wells are a good distance away from here. These are actually in the town of Hollis, just off the corner of Merrimack, right near the intersection of Amherst and Hollis. We actually have 2 wells in the town of Hollis, but we only supply water into Merrimack. It's right in the corner. We feed water into the corner of the southwest corner of Merrimack. But again, you're kind of seeing sort of the same pattern here is, you know, the summer, the late summer into the fall is when we start seeing some of the spikes occurring in this well as well. And again, it's PFOA. That's really the only thing that is in violation of any groundwater standards in New Hampshire. The other 3 regulated compounds are not above their MCLs. And then well 8, again, I'm looking at some of the spikes here being in the summer and late fall as well. So again, I know we have this one anomaly here with PFOS that came up pretty close to the 15 MCL, but again, it's predominantly PFOA is what's happening here. So I told you well 3 we had to abandon. So we ended up drilling a new well 9 recently. So this only has data going back to 2023 because the well was recently constructed. So well 9 is very close to well 2, sort of in the central portion of the town of Merrimack. And when we did the pump test on this, we pumped this for like 15 days. And I think we got non-detect during the pump test. But once we put this well online, which is, I think it was around like April or May of 2023, you know, we're treating this well now, obviously, but all of a sudden the PFOA spiked from essentially 0 up to 30 within 2 months of operation. And then it looks like it started coming back down, almost essentially back to non-detect, and then spiked again just this summer of 24. So again, we got a couple of more summertime related spikes here. And since that spike, it starts coming back down again. So we're in like the low single digits again from the December results. So it kind of seems to be a pattern on late summer or midsummer to fall, maybe even into early winter, where we get predominantly the highest levels in our typical annual cycle of PFOA. So that was really all I wanted to present on that aspect of it. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything at this point before we move on. Go ahead, Mindy.
Sorry, I'm not able to use any of the functions. I don't know what's going on, but I couldn't raise my hand. So have you ever thought of, regarding the load, potential future load to the system, possibly doing some Shelby tube samples or something within the cone of influence? But there also may be not just a water level mediator going on, but there also could be like a pH mediator. Do you guys do any general chemistry of the water to see if that matches with some of the, either in advance or post the spikes you get?
I mean, we do collect mineral, you know, iron, manganese, all the secondary minerals. We do collect pH information. I don't know that anybody's correlated that, but as far as collecting our own soil samples and things, I don't think we've gone to that level basically at this point. Honestly, I think we're just trying to commit our resources to maintaining and changing out the media, as opposed to, you know, looking to see and identify if there's any correlations with anything else. I mean, it is concerning if there is an overall upward trend on the PFOA coming through. That's concerning, because I don't know if over the next subsequent years, you know, that just means the filters are going to get saturated more if the concentrations are higher, and we'll have breakthrough happening faster. So that's something we have to deal with. But we haven't really.
These are, oh, sorry. These are, remind me, these are all bedrock wells, or are these all overburden? So they screen.
Yeah. All sand and gravel, screen well interface. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, a Shelby tube sample, you know, if you could do maybe a couple just to see what you get, but that might help you, not sure. It might help judge some potential residual contamination stuff in there.
Yeah, I think there's been some soil sampling done around these wells in the vicinity, and you know, it certainly is in the soil. I don't remember what the magnitude was, but it, you know, I guess what we'd want to know is maybe over time, is the soil concentration decreasing? You know, you would expect that to happen, but I think we only did a one point in time analysis out here, and this was in conjunction with, we were looking at doing aquifer recharge, artificial recharge at wells 4 and 5, so that we can get a little bit more source capacity out of those 2 wells. So we did some analysis because we were concerned putting surface water through the soil could mobilize more of that PFAS and cause the groundwater concentrations to go up. So we certainly haven't pulled the trigger on that project yet. It turns out that it's going to be very costly to implement just for a small amount of additional source capacity. So I don't know that it makes sense for us to, you know, we're talking, it was like $7 million just to put artificial recharge on, which would be pumping water out of the Merrimack River and bringing it up and recharging it next to these wells in a recharge basin. So that project's kind of on hold right now, and we're looking at a multitude of options for additional source capacity. But right now we do have an interconnect wholesale agreement with Nashua, Pennachuck. There's an interconnect down by Pennachuck Square, 101A, and we are allowed to take up to 250,000 gallons a day on average and 500,000 gallons a day peak. And we've been kind of limiting that just to the summer when we need it, because there is low level PFOA in that supply. Whereas Merrimack's wells, where we basically have a policy where we are shooting for non-detect of all PFAS compounds. We've never had any PFOA or PFOS, any of the regulated compounds, even detected in our effluent going into our distribution system after all of the treatment plants were online. We've never had a detection, but we do get some low-level breakthrough of PFBS comes through, or PFBA usually comes through first because it's a short chain. Yeah, Laureen?
A comment and a question. My comment is that I'm not, this isn't my line of work, I'm a social worker, but it isn't just, I think, what's coming from above, it's also what's below. So not just groundwater, but the plume. You know, we used to hear about the plume a few years ago. Somebody at DES was talking about mapping plumes way back in the beginning. So, you know, we know the site is heavily contaminated and that plume is going to shift depending on pumping. But also what strikes me in the fall of 2024, and I can't say what the impact is without a shadow of doubt because I'm not qualified, but I just think, what's changed in that fall? Demolition was going on and the site work was going on big time at that point. So who knows, you know, what you're disrupting as you do your demolition and site work. So hopefully with that done, maybe things will even out. The other thing I wondered is, I know you don't have to track it, but at one point you have the data, but have you plotted, you know, the PFBA, PFHPA, PFDEA, PFH, those 4 that we see consistently after PFOA, and if so, do you know if they have the same pattern? Because if they do, that would really, in wells 4 and 5 in particular, that would really speak to that, you know, kind of fingerprint, if you will, of Saint-Gobain.
Yeah, you know, I do remember seeing all of those parameters plotted. I think it was a different company we had doing those originally. This is from Underwood engineers doing this work, this plotting here of just the regulated compounds. But I'd have to go back and look and see. I don't know that we followed up on that. We might have plotted that, the non-regulated compounds initially, and then just kind of dropped that off because we were kind of more concerned with the regulated compounds as far as tracking them. So I know we did at one point, but I don't know that we've updated that for maybe the last couple of years.
The reason I ask that is, of course, the engineers are going to plot what the law is, right? But we also know what breaks through first, and we know the precursor patterns, and that dictates when we change the medium, right?
Right. Yeah, so what the policy that MVD has in place now is when we replace one vessel's media, then the lag vessel becomes the lead vessel. And from that day that lag vessel becomes the lead vessel, we monitor the effluent coming out of there. And we will attempt to replace that media as soon as it breaks through, but no sooner than 8 months. So if it breaks through in 4 months, we're going to have 4 months of breakthrough. But again, that's breaking through the lead vessel, and it's going now into the lag vessel, which was just recently replaced with new media. All right. But what that's doing, so it's not necessarily getting into the distribution system. Sometimes those those small chains do break into the distribution system at very low concentrations, but you're basically compromising the lag vessel by letting it break through the lead vessel. But it's a trade-off that MVD had to kind of put in place because we need to balance our budget with the goals of trying to be non-detect. And for the most part, I'd say 90 to 95% of the time, because we do measure the distribution system quarterly, and we find non-detect of all PFAS samples in the distribution system about 90 or 95% of the time. And you know, it's not perfect, it's not 100%, but it's kind of a trade-off. You know, if we went to like a 6 month change out or an immediate change out whenever we saw the first breakthrough, you know, the concern would be the cost would be increased. We'd probably have to increase the rates. And, you know, I don't want this to be looked at negatively by the customers and say, why are you doing this when we're not even obligated to do it legally, and you're raising our rates, and have all of the progress we made go in reverse. So it's a balancing act. And you're well aware of it.
I think you're doing as well a job as anyone could do, other than the fact of, you know, other states that have river water that have these massive RO treatment plants that are insanely expensive, but over time the maintenance is less. So you're doing a great job. And I think what I hear from the public over and over and over, and anybody watches these videos or at least asks on Facebook is where they usually ask. We still have, unfortunately, and you know this, right? People who still say, oh, I don't drink the water, I buy bottled, I don't, quote, trust it. So over and over and over, I'm saying, and other people are starting to message this too, which is good to see, that, you know, bottled water is not the solution to have all that plastic exposure. And I'm always saying to people, $200 for an APAC reverse osmosis dedicated tap in your kitchen. And if that gives you peace of mind for short chain and breakthroughs, you can, you know, split it off to your freezer for ice cubes in your fridge if you want that. And then you are set. That is well worth it. And I think other people are messaging that too. I see people give that advice, and it's really good to see as a community that people are caring and aware of their exposure, because they still are seeing, you know, these illnesses that keep getting diagnosed in the same individual, another one, another one, another one. So thank you for all your work, because you've had our health in mind. The MVD has done consistently, not just the law, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, well, luckily we projected about a 70% rate increase, and we actually ended up right on there, and we haven't raised the rates for a couple years, and we don't need to raise the rates for the next fiscal year either. So we're kind of maintaining so far, but it's a lot of moving parts with the cost of chemicals and power and all kinds of other things in there. But thanks. Gary, did you have a question?
Just a little more technical, just for my own clarification, building on Mindy's questions about local variations and other measures that you may be doing that show similar fluctuations in other background entities, you know, routine things. By the same token, to get some idea of the dynamics of the aquifer, and again, it's not in your purview, but is there any data available to compare to distant sites? Especially now, since we're finding that the PFAS materials are just ubiquitous. Is there any way to, is that available at all? I'm realizing it's not your purview, for this, and clearly the intrinsic numbers are real, but it would be interesting to see what kind of background variation in a distant site would be.
Yeah, so in other words, like is there a control well somewhere that
Yeah, right, exact, same
outside
idea.
of the
If you're
region?
running an experiment, you need a control.
Right. I'm not aware of one. I'm not aware that anyone is doing monthly PFAS testing on groundwater for the record period that we have here going back to 2016. But if that existed, that would be good to know if it's following the same pattern. And you know, again, at first I wasn't sure if we were looking at the peaks being because of pumping the wells harder in those periods of time, but I'm tending to think it's not that, because like I said, by, you know, after you get into the month of October, you know, middle of October, I mean, I see them around town, all the trucks going around with the air compressors and blowing out everyone's irrigation system, and our demand drops right off, you know, in the middle of October, even beginning of October. So if you still got those spikes in PFOA occurring after that, I'm thinking it's more of a dilution issue, with precipitation being, you know, a little bit more scarce during those times. You're going to get a higher concentration by not diluting it. And I think in the spring and early summer, when you got the snow melt and more precipitation typically, you know, that's probably when you get the valleys, because you get the dilution going on. But it's all anecdotal. Like, there is no control well that we found. I don't know if the DES has any other wells that may be monitored, or USGS or something, on a more frequent basis, so they can kind of track, you know, how it varies. That would be good information to see if it follows the same patterns.
Well, I think you're right. The aquifer dynamics plays the biggest role.
Right, right.
Yeah, I'll chime in, Don, since you had brought it up. Like, this is a phenomenon we see at a lot of different sites. Unfortunately, fortunately for, I guess, for MVD, you have that monthly sampling, so you're able to pinpoint it. We don't always see, it's not necessarily the same at every site though. You know, like you indicated, I think what's going on here is, we're getting towards the end of the summer. There's less water coming into the aquifer, so you just don't have that dilution of the contaminants. The PFAS start to become a little bit more concentrated. So we see that at a lot of contaminated sites, not just with PFAS, but with any sort of contaminant. It's a pretty regular occurrence, and then you might have, lower concentrations in the spring, like we have at MVD, where you're getting that dilution from snowmelt and precipitation. Unfortunately, it actually can work the other way sometimes too, though, where in the spring you have more flushing of the system, so you actually have higher concentrations, where things are kind of, you end up with a higher concentration in the spring because you're just flushing more out of the soil and stuff like that. And then in the fall, you might be pulling from like a slightly different, you don't have as much flushing, so it actually can go down. So it all depends. Every site is very different, and we can't say for certain that each site's going to be that same kind of occurrence. So
Right.
to touch on your, you brought up the soil sampling, like that's, and how long this could end up going on. That's really hard to say without kind of continuous soil sampling to see what's in there now. You'd want soil samples over a long period of time, I guess, or just a set, because like you said, we have like that one snapshot in time, and we don't tend to do a lot of soil sampling like that. Over time, we focus on the groundwater sampling. But and there's a lot of factors that, we have our soil remediation standards are low, and they're based off of, they're a leaching based number. So I'd probably venture to guess that the soil concentrations in that area are probably above the soil remediation standards. But there's a lot of other factors that come into play with the soil types, and if there's going to be some PFAS retained or more flushed to, into the aquifer. So.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. That makes sense.
Yep.
I'm calling in. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, I've got a question.
I can hear you.
Okay. This is Wendy Thomas, and I just couldn't get the software program to work. But Don, thank you for this information. And to sort of piggyback off of Lorraine's question, this summer we're going to have a lot of highway work done, and I think they're doing more blasting. I'm not 100% sure, but is there any concern that the construction and the blasting in particular is going to affect the water, essentially by shaking up all the PFAS in the soil and getting it into the water?
Yeah, I mean, there's always concern that moving soil around could expose PFAS, to be washed into the groundwater. I don't know what we can do about it. I don't know if there's a moratorium on migration of soil in the Everett Turnpike project or not. Yeah, maybe Andy has a.
Yeah, I can
an
speak a
answer to
little
that.
to that because I do work with the DOT and their consultants on the Everett Turnpike expansion project. There is a risk of stirring up some of the soil. They've done some pretty extensive sampling of soil and then done groundwater testing all along the entire section. But they do employ best management practices and soil management in their soil management plan, where they are disturbing soil, but they're actually directing groundwater to certain areas too. So it's not going to be just mixing everything up and then causing everything to release. Like they divert water off into certain areas, and then where the higher concentration areas, they try to divert it away from those. And all that soil is all staying within the right of way of the highway. So we do look at that, but we don't anticipate that being. Basically, they want sheet flow and runoff away from the highway into gullies and things away. So we don't expect that to result in significant spikes or releases of PFAS in the environment from that disturbance.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right. If there are no other questions, I know just one other thing I wanted to touch on. I know Chris had asked me about an update on the, just so I don't know if everybody knows here, but those two wells that I was talking about, wells 4 and 5 that are closest to the Saint-Gobain facility, MVD entered into a settlement agreement with Saint-Gobain back in 2018 for Saint-Gobain to basically build and pay for the majority of the cost of a new treatment plant for those two wells. And in addition to that, they put aside an escrow amount that totaled $534,000. It was supposed to be for 5 years of operation and maintenance of the granular activated carbon filters, which was estimated at about $107,000 annually. So over 5 years, that added up to about $535,000. The last bit of that escrow fund was just exhausted in October of 24. So the escrow lasted 4 years. It didn't quite get into the 5th year, although the media that's in place now is in the 5th year. But I'm pretty sure that that's going to have to be changed out, because we're with the policy that we have, the 8-month, we usually get breakthrough of the lead vessel in less than 8 months. So you can pretty much rest assured that we're changing our media out every 8 months in our vessels. So that last change out was October. So, you're probably looking at June for the next change out. So it came up a little bit short, but back then, I don't think anybody was thinking about changing the media based on unregulated contaminants. Everybody was just looking at PFOA because that was the one that was most prominent here. So anyway, I just wanted to give that update. And the last big money item that MVD is going to be faced with is that over the next 5 years, it's going to be time to replace all of our customers' meters. Some have been replaced recently, but the majority of our customers, because it goes in like a 20-year cycle, I guess. So now we're getting into the period where the majority of meters are going to have to be replaced over the next 5 years. And that's estimated to cost a total of about $2.3 million just to go in people's homes and change out meters. And the one good thing on that is we'll be able to look at people's service connections, because there's also a lead and copper inventory thing that's going on. And, it helps to identify what kind of pipe is coming into the homeowner's location. If it's plastic pipe, you're not going to have lead and copper, but if it's, something other than that, if it's a lead pipe, which I don't know that we have any of those, I'm not aware that we do. But so we're kind of being able to kill 2 birds at 1 stone by doing that. But we've been putting aside money for that, and but we're still going to have to raise some more revenue to come up with that 2.3 million over the next 5 years. So there's always something new coming down the pipe. And that's really all I had. I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
Other questions for Don? Don, I just have one. Where the escrow, O&M escrow's been exhausted at this point, is that 107,000 a year going to hit ratepayers in the next fiscal year?
We've got that budgeted in to the budget, and if we can still maintain this next fiscal year's budget is a 4% increase over the last fiscal year's budget, but we didn't think we needed to raise the rates because of that. Hopefully that's still the case. We're sending our spent carbon out to get regenerated. So they put it through some kind of a kiln process where they burn off all of the contaminants that were absorbed onto the media, and then they deliver it back. So we're getting the same media, we're just recycling it basically. And there's about a 10 or 15% loss of media that you can't get back when you do that process. So we always have to buy an additional 10 or 15% makeup media. So that process has been working out pretty good. We finally found a company that is responsive, and on a short notice they can come in and take care of us. And it's a more economical process than we were paying for initially. So that's good. But yep, so that's it.
Good. And troubling that we see that trend with wells 4 and 5 continuing upward.
Right. I agree.
Okay. Andy is filling in for Mike Wimsat. So thank you, Andy, for being with us this Friday.
Yeah, and if someone else can take away my screen sharing, is it right here? Okay. I think it's gone now, right? All right, thanks.
Okay.
Sure, ready for me now, Chris?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Few things to update the commission on, and we'll kind of work through those. A lot of it's some similar stuff from the past, but there's a few new things, so it'll be interesting. I'll start with just a brief overview from Air Resources. Saint-Gobain had submitted the request to the Air Resource Division to terminate their permit, but no action's been taken on that request yet. They are going to be required to satisfy all reporting requirements of the permit and submit emission fees prior to the termination, but obviously they're no longer emitting, and that permit, we do foresee that permit just being terminated soon since there's nothing there. So they're no longer doing any of the stack testing, obviously, or any of that stuff, but I would expect something there in this first half this year, probably on that. As far as probably some of our biggest news is the Saint-Gobain closure there at the facility. Obviously, in August of 2023, we were notified that Saint-Gobain was going to be closing their facility to restructure their composite solutions business. They completed all manufacturing operations, and all equipment was removed from the facility throughout 2024. They've indicated that they're going to continue to work with us ongoing in the environmental investigation and remediation effort, including providing bottled water, permanent and alternate water as appropriate within the consent decree area. They have hired Ramball, which is a global engineering firm, to assist with the plant closure activities. And they've been providing us with interim progress reports on those activities, including we received a letter report in April of 2024 documenting their efforts, and then again in September 2024. We've also been completing periodic site visits to review the facility conditions and then receive updates from their consultant at Saint-Gobain on the closure activities. As everyone's aware, in October 2024, they announced their plans to demolish the building, and they immediately began that work associated with it, including disconnection of all utilities and asbestos abatement. They've received all their demolition permits from the town of Merrimack. Initial demolition pertained to the low bay portion of the building, and then some of the ancillary structures that associated with the facility on the outsides of it. Most of that demo work associated with those structures has been completed. So the only portion really remaining now is most of the high bay building. And a permit for that demo was obtained in January, and that work, as I indicated, that work has been started. As of February 11th, so a little bit earlier this week, the only remaining structure is the high bay portion. The northernmost wall of that building has been removed, and that was to facilitate removal of some interior overhead gantry cranes. And those were taken out in late January, early February. They were taken off and they'll be disposed of. From this point, the building is reportedly going to be dismantled in sections. They'll remove the roof, the exterior walls, and then remove all the interior steel structures following that. Kind of piece by piece, they've got a large machine that kind of pulls each section down. They've indicated all structural steel is going to be removed and go off as scrap steel for recycling. Demo debris from portions of the building that's been significantly impacted by PFAS contamination is going to be disposed of in an out-of-state hazardous waste landfill. They are planning to remove the entire above ground structure and leave the concrete floor foundation. They've been scarifying the concrete floor, kind of chewing up to remove surficial contamination before removal of the exterior structure. And this removes about 1/8 to maybe 1/2 inch of concrete in areas where application coating was performed, just about most of the concrete floor. They anticipate that all the demolition activities are going to be done in 2025 of this year. And it's the demo work's continuing through these winter months, kind of as weather permits. They have been, we've requested they providing periodic status reports for that work. That includes, a schedule of activities performed, over the month, and then what's kind of projected for the coming months. We've received updates in January, and then another one that just this February. And as I indicated, we're going to continue to remain in frequent contact with them and try to get out there for site visits periodically, just to, to have boots on the ground and kind of see what's happening there. So. Does anyone have any specific questions they want to ask on the demo of the building?
I have a
Andrew,
question.
Hi, this is Amy. Oh. Go ahead.
Okay. This is Wendy Thomas. What is going to happen to the land? It's obviously contaminated. Is the state going to sit on it, or can Saint-Gobain sell that land? What is up with that?
They've not relayed what their plans are for the land right now, other than they're removing the building and the structure. They have not indicated any that they're planning to sell it or anything. So I imagine they're going to remove the structure and then it'll just remain as it is. But the state's not going to be owning it or taking a part in that. It would be Saint-Gobain's responsibility to kind of maintain that land. They could sell it, I suppose, but then Saint-Gobain would still retain the environmental liability for all the contamination that is there.
Okay, that was because Flatley is developing all of those warehouses around Saint-Gobain, and I can envision them buying that property to put in yet another warehouse. But Saint-Gobain would forever be responsible for the contamination?
Yes, yeah, it's their contamination.
Okay.
They've released it to the environment. It's theirs. But yeah, maybe they would sell it to Flatley. I don't know. Like I said, they have not relayed any sort of plan to do that yet, though.
Who the heck would
Thank you.
buy?
I missed the question.
Don, did you have a question or?
What exactly is this disposition of the air discharge permit? Did you say that was no longer in force, or?
It's essentially terminated because they're not doing any air emissions, but it hasn't been formally terminated yet. They still have some final paperwork, I believe, to submit, and then probably some fees. That's my understanding.
Right, because I know we were wondering all along, is the permit transferable to a new owner or something like that? And with them taking the building down, I wouldn't think that a new owner would go in there and try to put in a PFAS coating factory and emit PFAS after all of this. But so that kind of alleviates that concern, I think, because we were wondering, they spent all this money to get the permit and then they decided to close shop within a matter of months after that. So it almost looked like they wanted to get the permit, so it valued the property higher, so they could sell the property to some other company to use that permit. But it doesn't sound like that. The permit doesn't necessarily follow the property, right? It follows the company that's if they even wanted to pursue a permit for this again, some other company, you know?
Yeah, I'm not 100% familiar on how Air Resources does their permitting, but it would stick with that procedure and their manufacturing process. It wouldn't just they couldn't just kind of hold on to it right now and sell this property saying, hey, we've got this permit if someone wants to develop this property. It doesn't, I don't believe it works that way, Don. So,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, I think they did spend a lot of money trying to get the permit. They also spent a lot of money installing the RTO in general. I
Right.
think it's a corporate decision. You know, there was a balance sheet and someone overseas probably was like, nope, we're done here. And then they just kind of pulled the plug on everything. So.
Okay, thanks.
Andrew, how is the 1/8 to 1/4 inch floor removal determined?
So they have it's a bobcat with an attachment on it. It's very similar to like a pavement eater, I guess. It's kind of got these teeth and it just goes and it grinds it all up. And they add a little bit of water to it too to kind of keep it from creating this huge dust cloud for, and everything going everywhere. And that kind of contains it. And then they scoop up that material and that's getting containerized and roll-offs and that's being shipped off to I don't know if it's a hazard or non-haz waste landfill, but it's getting disposed of.
Yeah, I guess my question is more, how did they determine that they only needed to remove 1/4 inch? I'm not familiar with how permeable the pavement is and how PFAS travels, but why
Well,
1/4 inch?
So they've done some testing of, I believe, of the concrete. I don't have that data. It was just, that they were well aware that concrete is porous, so it's going to absorb some contamination. It absorbs all contamination, but I don't know how deep that goes into the concrete. It was just kind of, I think it was I don't want to say arbitrary, but they knew that if they got that upper kind of layer of concrete, they're going to significantly reduce that PFAS mass that's in the concrete. So.
And so the rest of the concrete would be sent to a non-hazardous facility?
Right now, the plan is for that concrete to stay. That plan might change, but that's going to stay there and be exposed to the environment. So one of the things that we're concerned with is what that means for the site and runoff and the conceptual site model in general. We want to know, what's the concentration of PFAS in that concrete. But it's not I guess it's not a simple. Trying to think of the best way to put this, like just because it's in the concrete doesn't mean it's going to leach out readily from the concrete. So it's really difficult to say, like, even though there's a certain number in that, what rate will it dissipate from the concrete and into the aquifer, or will it not? Is it kind of absorbed in there and not really desorb, I guess, from that material? Mindy?
I guess I have a follow-up. I think what Amy was getting at, I think it was Amy, is there a post-remedial sampling plan that they have to do of the concrete? And then if it's determined, I mean, I would think they would have to do some kind of, TCLP testing, possibly for PFAS or something, to see what could be desorbing from the concrete. And does that, I mean, it seems like it's just sort of an arbitrary decision made that they're going to strip off an X number of thickness off the top, but what's going to happen and how are we going to hold them accountable once they're gone? Like all this stuff is sort of, are they doing any TCLP sampling? Is that possible for PFAS? And is that being evaluated?
They're trying to figure out what the best way to sample it is, I guess, because with like a TCLP or SPLP, like that involves taking that chunk of concrete and crushing it all up and then seeing what kind of shows up in the liquid, right? That's not exactly what's going to happen at the site either, though, because they're not crushing it all up and leaving it there. So that's kind of, I guess that's a conservative result. They have not, I don't know exactly what sampling they've done. And so far, just scarifying that concrete really, I guess it is somewhat arbitrary that what they're doing out there. Overall, I'd expect the PFAS probably is going to desorb from the soil that's contaminated around the facility faster than it's going to desorb from the concrete, but it's something that we're definitely paying attention to because we want to know how this is going to change groundwater conditions and how it really kind of plays into the conceptual site model.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm concerned. I know it's going to desorb faster from the soil, but like we just heard Don talk about these continuing increasing possible levels of PFOA. So why are you know, I mean, as long as they're leaving, why just don't they just take up all the concrete then and get rid of it? I'm sure there's a lot, and I'm sure it's a cost issue, but you know, oh well. So like, I don't understand why we're allowing them to leave a source of contamination behind that we know to some level is going to continue to contribute. Actually, that will be like a much longer time span too, that it continues to contribute to the, you know, PFOA levels, and then that contribute to the water issues. So why isn't it that we're just making them take it all up and get it out? That's not uncommon. I mean, you know, TCL, you know, closures of, you know, hazardous waste facilities all the time have to pick up all the concrete and take it off.
Yep. I mean, I think it's really difficult to say. I don't know if we have a regulatory mechanism to make them remove all of that concrete. We're not, I mean, that could be part of the remedial action plan that they put forth. We don't know yet, but they're still kind of evaluating those alternatives. You know, we didn't have the ability necessarily to force them to demo the building completely altogether too. I think that there was probably higher concentrations in the roofing material and some of that interior material than what's in the concrete and leaching off of it. We know from the sampling that there were pretty significant slugs and of PFAS that were getting released during significant rainstorms. But it's something we're going to be watching on, and like we will be having. We'll be watching that, and then you know, we will have further discussions, and maybe that ends up being a component of the remedial action plan. I don't know yet, though. Don?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I remember hearing this from Mike Wimsat, and I don't know if it was at the last meeting. I missed the last meeting, but I did watch the replay of it, or maybe it was a prior meeting. But somebody had asked that question, how do we know how much to take off? And I thought what he said was that, you know, they'll scrape off a certain thickness. And I thought he said they tested it to see if it's still, you know, I don't know if there's a threshold or something they must be looking at. If it was above that threshold, they'd go back and scrape more off and kind of test it until they see a number that's acceptable. I thought I remember him saying that. I'm not positive, but that kind of makes sense. I don't know if anybody else has a recollection of that or not. And I don't know.
So they are testing the concrete after they scarify it. I just don't have that data for the PFAS. I think what he was speaking to specifically at that time, though, was there was an area where there were some PCBs in the concrete, and so that where there actually is a regulatory threshold they had to meet. They went, they scarified it, they tested it, it was above. They had to go back and they had to scarify it again and test it again.
So that doesn't necessarily exist for PFAS yet, I guess.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, okay.
I have another question. Our historical society was gifted by St. Gobain several shelving units and some computer stands. And I was very I mean, I didn't think they should have accepted these things, but they did. Is there any way those pieces of equipment and furniture could be tested for PFAS, or is that beyond the purview of what you do?
There are some sampling techniques like wipe sampling. That's not something that we've had St. Gobain do. I don't know if they would come in and test the shelving units.
Okay.
How much
I mean,
is that
I have some concerns about that. You know, I mean, they're heavily contaminated, but I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Just to follow on Wendy's question, this is Amy. How much is that testing for those kinds of, like for furniture, for, you know, solid pieces? What is that wipe test?
I'm not sure what those tests would run, so I'm not familiar with it. At least the analytical costs, I mean.
I think if I'm not mistaken, there was a metal storage container, Connex container that was the town was anticipating taking possession of from St. Gobain, and I don't think they did, if I'm not mistaken about that. But
They did not.
Right. For that same reason.
Andy, Were you done with your presentation? I know you were talking about the air division.
Nope, that was just on the demo. I have a couple other things that I can update
Okay.
everyone on. A lot of same information, but to get on to alternate water and the point of entry treatment systems, as everyone's aware, St. Cobain's had their contractors, Second Wind Water Systems and Culligan have been installing point of entry treatment systems since late 2022. As of earlier this month, they've installed about 690 of those systems. They have also been conducting periodic maintenance on those point of entry treatment systems since they've been installed in accordance with a work plan that they'd submitted to us. We had received a report documenting the kind of the initial installation efforts through 2023. That was received in April of 2024. That summarized, the installation kind of initial testing. We are anticipating another summary report is going to be submitted to us likely in the April 2025 timeframe, and we're interested in that because I think that's going to show how the carbon and all the point of entry treatment systems have they've been in operation for a year, 2 years, so that we'll have had some periodic maintenance at least. So we'll be closely looking at that data when it comes in. As far as municipal water projects, they've been proceeding with construction work for water line installations within the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, Londonderry, and Merrimack. Some of these are areas with existing water lines where homes require connections to the water mains in the street, and then there are other areas where new water mains are going to be installed. Construction associated with the Hillcrest Road water main extension area of Litchfield has been substantially completed. There is some final paving and restoration work for that area that will be performed in spring of 2025, though. St. Cobain anticipates notifying those residents this month. There's about 87 of them that the bottled water deliveries will be discontinued. Their contractors have started completing service connections to existing mains in the town of Bedford and Londonderry. That was in 2024. Exterior work in those areas is on hold, and that remaining exterior work will be completed in the spring when the roadways are reopened for construction. There is some interior service connection work that's continuing through the these winter months. Their consultant for St. Cobain finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack area, which includes the Wildcat, Brenda Lane, and then service connections. And they began construction late summer of 2024. The water main extension on Brenda, John, Edward Lanes has been installed. Testing is all completed. Exterior service line connections are complete, and interior water meter installation has been completed at 14 properties. Remaining water meters and restoration tasks will occur in the spring of 2025. Connections to existing water mains in Merrimack and Bedford began in July 2024. That contract has installed service lines from stop to end at 31 locations, and water meters have been installed at 9 locations in Bedford and 14 locations in Merrimack. St. Cobain continues to work with the water utility in the town of Londonderry to evaluate the feasibility of water line extensions in that town. We've met with St. Cobain, the town of Londonderry, the water utility a few times to discuss the expanded water service in that area, and those negotiations continue. On to residential well sampling. St. Cobain has proposed to conduct long-term monitoring of drinking water wells under a work plan. They're calling it the Groundwater Management Zone Work Plan. NHDES has reviewed the revised work plan that they submitted in December of 2024, and we provided approval with comments in just last month on January 15th. In general, this revised work plan proposes to conduct sampling so that by the end of 2026, there should be 6 PFAS sample results for each property that are eligible for sampling through the St. Cobain's program. So for most of those properties, it's going to be semi-annual sampling. It'll be 2 samples this year in 2025 and then 2 samples in 2026. So we've been periodically receiving updated proposals from St. Cobain to remedy alternate water supplies in the consent decree area following the initial agreements that were in April and June of 2022. The most recent was term sheet attachment 23, which was received and reviewed by NHDES in January. We expect the next one to come in. They're on a bi-monthly basis, so we'll expect the next one to come in on in March. All water supply well sampling had previously been under their work plan for residential well sampling. That's going to be transitioned over to the GMZ work plan discussed before. That's going to supersede that previous sampling plan that's approved for drinking water monitoring at the site. As of the end of January, second samples have been collected from a little over 1,200 properties. But that number, that number is going to start to kind of, like, so we'll be kind of looking at the numbers probably a little bit differently here in the coming months as we go along here, because they're going to start ramping up sampling quite a bit. They've already started their sampling under that groundwater management zone work plan. I know that started at the end of January, and they'll be ramping up to do pretty significant sampling effort. Overall, though, for some numbers, as of the 29th of January, they have identified 3,868 properties for sampling. Of those, 2,578 samples have been collected from water supply wells, and then 1,211 second samples. And then there have been 1,183 properties that have been sampled have been offered bottled water. So it's about 6 more than what we reported back for December. On to the remedial action plan. As everyone might be aware, a RAP was submitted to DES back in May of 2023. We met with Saint-Gobain and their consultant shortly after that to discuss that RAP, and they agreed to submit a RAP addendum following those discussions. The RAP addendum fell short in our purview and didn't meet the requirements of ENVOR 600. So we had provided formal comment on that RAP and RAP addendum back in October. They indicated that they will, we outlined the deficiencies in that letter too. We met with them again in November 2024, and they've indicated they're going to submit another RAP addendum that further evaluates remedial alternatives that may reduce contamination at the site. In the meantime, their consultants has indicated that they've identified some data gaps that would need to be addressed to respond to our comments and prepare that revised RAP addendum. And they anticipate submitting to DES a work plan that will kind of identify those objectives and the scope of any supplemental investigation that they'll be doing. And that is most of my update that I have. I don't know if there are any questions on anything else.
When is the work plan due from Saint-Gobain?
For the remedial action plan? Or
Yeah, the work plan to gather the supplemental data to fill in those gaps and complete the remedial action plan.
We
When
haven't
is the work plan due?
We haven't given them a due date on that. Our initial due date had been the end of January, and they indicated they weren't going to meet that. They just recently gave us this proposal, so I need to meet with my management to see how we're going to respond back to that on that.
Gotcha, thank you.
I can't tell you they proposed second quarter of 2025 for those work plans, but I don't know if that's going to be sufficient for us. So.
Okay. Questions for Andy? I don't see everybody on my screen, but I don't. Andy, for the past 2 years, I think that they've been doing resampling. The wells that have tested at the non-detect level or close to it, initially 5 to 10% test over the AGQS for PFOA, and then those that are slightly below the AGQS, 30% were above it on the second sampling. Does it, if you have looked at it recently, is that holding true?
Yeah, that's for the most part. Those are the numbers that have been holding true, and a lot of that's because there was an initial jump with the second sampling. I believe it was 2023 when they started that effort. There was quite a bit of sampling that was done. That's slowed down quite a bit over the last 6 months. All that sampling effort. There's only been a handful that kind of come in each month, so it hasn't changed those numbers.
And you mentioned that you expect to see an increase in sampling, resampling.
Well, so they have already started the groundwater management zone work plan that they've submitted. So they already have samplers out. They started at the end of January, just about immediately after receiving our approval. So we'll start having more data coming in here over the next few months for sure.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Andy. Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Sure, thank you. For the record, my name is Michelle Ropers. I'm the Bureau Chief for Public Health Protection within the Division of Public Health Services at the Department of Health and Human Services. And I'm here to provide some updates on both the Merrimack cancer investigation and also the department's data analysis project as well. So I'll start off today with giving you an update on the Merrimack cancer investigation that Dartmouth is leading. So the teams continue to meet monthly with the steering committee of the project, and the community advisory board. The quarterly meeting was held, I believe, yesterday, and the scientific advisory board, which is a quarterly meeting, the last meeting was held on February 5th. So the study has 4 main components, which I'll summarize here. And also I'm going to provide these updates in a written format so I can send them along after the meeting. And there are some links that you'll have access to through the written documents as well. So the first part of it is the community engagement studios and the online feedback form. So the project, the community engagement studios are complete at this point. But the feedback form remains live on the department's website, and in the written version of this, I have a link here that you can access it. The Dartmouth team regularly reviews comments and questions submitted by community members that have ideas or suggestions related to the feasibility study. The feedback form is best for anonymous comments, so you can go onto the website and provide your comments. And there is a study email. It's kidney.study@dartmouth.edu, which is also, again, you can have a link to it in these written notes. That's the best way to connect with Dartmouth if you'd like to have a direct response to their comments, questions, or suggestions. So the second component is the cancer registry analysis. And I know originally we were hoping to have Dartmouth come to this meeting, but due to, which I can talk about in this update here, that they've had to push it back, and hopefully we'll be able to come to the next meeting, but I can follow up with you to determine whether or not they'll be available, or they'll be ready for the March 14th meeting. So the cancer registry data analysis team, which is led by Dr. Salas, is working towards finalizing the analysis with feedback from the steering committee and the scientific advisory board. The team, Dartmouth, was informed of an additional data analysis, which the commission, HB 737 commission, requested of the department that's being conducted by the department, which will include new cases from the VA data that will be submitted to the New Hampshire Cancer Registry. The new cases are anticipated to be incorporated into the data available to DHHS by mid to late February. I think the last meeting we were unsure as to when all of that data would be available, but it's looking like it's coming in a little earlier than we anticipated. So due to the changes above, or due to the changes I just mentioned, sorry, the commission's presentation, the Dartmouth's presentation to the commission, which was scheduled for today, obviously has been postponed. So Dr. Salas is working to review and harmonize the additional new kidney cancers from the VA through diagnosis year 2021, so that the Dartmouth team may update their analysis of the cancer registry data to provide the most up-to-date information consistent with the analysis of the other cancers being done by the department, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Dr. Romano and Dr. Salas hope to provide a presentation to the commission at the next meeting, which I think is March 14th. But again, this will be dependent on the timing of the 2021 VA cases being processed and the analysis complete. So I will, keep you all informed if March 14th is a go. If that's okay with the commission, I will keep you up to date on that. And the next component of the study is the UNH feasibility study. So the team has been working with the UNH Survey Center to deploy a survey to a representative sample of adult residents in New Hampshire. And this is the Granite panel. It's an established panel. This will allow Dartmouth to understand community concerns about and knowledge of environmental health issues in New Hampshire, and gauge interest in participating in a future population-based research study. By understanding the likelihood of participation in research and large community sample, they'll be able to closer understand the feasibility of conducting such a study. So the survey of 40 questions was distributed to 8,500 people, which is part of the Granite State panel that UNH has as part of their survey center. And that was distributed from November 24th, 2024 to November 25th, 2024. And they also had an oversampling of residents in Merrimack and the 8 surrounding towns. So they purposefully, oversampled in those areas. The Dartmouth team requested edits from the UNH Survey Center. So they're working on a report at this point. So they requested edits to the UNH Survey Center to make the report more tailored to the project goals. And the draft report was received by Dartmouth on January 30th, 2025. And the Dartmouth team is currently working on final edits and will share the report once it's finalized. And the last component of the study is what we're calling a pilot study. So the Dartmouth team continues to work on the pilot study design and IRB protocol, which, given the dynamic nature of the feasibility study and the IRB process, they've had to modify the study team's timeline. The team has been in contact with the Dartmouth Health and Dartmouth College IRB teams for process clarifications, and after lengthy discussions, it was determined that IRB approval will be pursued through Dartmouth College's Committee for the Protection of Human Subjects. The team is working on the required forms and materials for the IRB protocol, and the pilot study will be the primary activity for the remainder of the contract, which the contract is due to expire at the end of June 2025. So the steering committee and the scientific advisory board were both presented with information on the study protocol on February 5th, and the steering committee approved the components of the protocol, and the scientific advisory board provided feedback on recruitment strategies, survey instruments, and sampling. And hopefully, like I said, Dartmouth will be able to present at next month's meeting, so certainly they can provide a lot more information relative to the work that they're doing. I also have an update on the department's analysis of other cancers. So as you all know, the commission provided the department with feedback and request of an interest of having the department analyze additional years of cancer registry data for other types of cancer. And so after receiving your feedback and consideration, the department is planning to update the appendix table in the cancer incidence report, Merrimack. So that was a report that was issued. I'm sorry, I don't have the last issuance of that report. I do have a link to it in my updates here, but the department is planning to do a reanalysis with the most recent registry data through 2021, including cancer types other than kidney renal cancer in Merrimack and the 9-town study area compared with the rest of New Hampshire. And that is because Dartmouth is focusing on the kidney and renal cancer as part of their study. The current cancer registry data years for 1995 through 2021 will be used in the analysis, and DHHS is in the process of finalizing the timeframes for the analysis. So the specific method in terms of how they're going to be doing the analysis. The VA cancer data will be available by mid to late February, and DHHS will incorporate the VA data into this analysis. And based on availability of the VA data, it will be a few months before DHHS can complete the data analysis, but we will certainly keep the commission updated on the progress and will be available to present the findings at a future meeting once it's complete. So that's what I have for updates. I'm certainly happy to answer questions if I can, or certainly take them back.
Maureen?
Just a brief comment, so everybody should be aware of it. You know, when they finished their contract in the summer, that was for the pilot, you know, program. In order to move forward to apply for a study, the funding source, of course, would be the NIH, and I just want to put a pin in it here. I know New Hampshire is talking about cuts to various departments and programs, but the federal government is also targeting the NIH. And we asked Dartmouth on the most recent update meeting, which was last night, you know, do you have concerns about this? And they did say they do. So I just want to put that out there. It would be a darn shame. And I asked, well, is there a backup plan? Is that the only funder? They are starting to talk with people about, could there be a foundation or another funding source or a combination thereof, after we had that discussion. So just as a heads up, you know, I would hate for all this work and the money that the legislation, you know, body in Concord approved for this program, you know, to go to waste. If anybody has any thoughts on funding, please give that feedback to DHHS or Dartmouth, because it looks like it is definitely going to be a problem depending on NIH. That's it. That's my comment.
Other questions or comments for Michelle? If not, I just want to express the Commission's appreciation that DHS is incorporating the VA data and doing it at such a rapid pace, and we'll be looking at the other cancers as well. I think it's terrific that we've taken advantage of this opportunity to do those additional study pieces.
Hi, Chris. It's Nancy Murphy. I wanted to thank DHHS too regarding the VA cancer data, because that was one of the issues that I had concerned about, and to also highlight the point that Laureen just made. We were on that the CAB call last night for the kidney cancer study, and with you know, we've worked so hard to get to this place. It would be a shame to see anything, you know, this funding issue just further complicate things. So, you know, anything that anybody can do would certainly be appreciated. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions for DHHS? If not, I don't know if any, usually Representative Mooney has a legislative update for us. I don't know if any of our legislative members have any updates for us on pending bills. If not, then we'll just wrap up. Our next meeting is going to be March 7th at 2 p.m. I will, since we have different members, again ask if there are better times to do it. I think I've learned over the years that Fridays are probably the only days that work during legislative sessions for these kinds of meetings, but we'll look at whether there's a more convenient time for folks. And that is it. So thank you all. Happy Valentine's.
Is it the 7th or the 14th of March?
Oh, I put on my agenda the 7th, but I'm probably wrong.
I don't know. I just have it down as the second
Friday. And I am wrong. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, I can procrastinate a little bit longer. I appreciate it. With that correction, the next meeting is March 14th, 2025 or 2025, and unless we come up with a different time, it will be at 2 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.